And then I remembered I wanted to try my new dream experiment. How fast can I go at like the limit? What's the possible speed? And I remembered the dream where I kind of got stuck and worried about hitting the trees, and then a few others. And I said, no, I don't want any limits. I just want to go pure, super, ultimate speed. So I just kind of think, I want to fly at the fastest as fast possible.
Is this a dream?
Seems like an easy question to answer, but is it? Really? If it was, then every night we could all be flying through the sky like superheroes, catching up with our favorite historical figures, seeking out answers to our most meaningful questions. The list goes on. My name is Adam Cotton, and I love to talk about lucid dreaming, dreams in which you are aware that you are dreaming. Yeah, I've got a few dream skills, but they could use some refining, like Luke in the first Star Wars movie when he meets Obi-Wan. In order to polish those up and learn more about this enigmatic state of consciousness, I'm going to find the explorers and professionals on the frontiers of this field, pick their brains, and bring you along for the ride. So, buckle up, my friend. It's time to step through the looking glass into the magical and mysterious world of dream logic, where things are not always as they seem, and where the sky is just the beginning. Greetings and salutations out there in the multiverses. Welcome to Is This a Dream? A lucid dreaming podcast, episode 6. A little housekeeping up front. You can find the show notes for this episode and others at isthisadreampodcast.com. And you can also follow us at facebook.com/isthisadreampodcast and at isthisadream_ on Instagram. So here's the deal. I'm going to let you in on my plan for the maiden voyage of this podcast. I'm putting out around 7 episodes for this first run, and then probably letting it float for a bit at that point. It takes a pretty hefty amount of time and effort to produce each of these, and as of now, I am a one-man team doing this for the love of it, aka there are no sponsors. You can do the math there. Maybe someday, if it strikes a chord with enough folks, I can make it my full-time job and keep it going. I'm game for that. But in the meantime, let me know if you are enjoying the podcast and want to hear more. There's a contact link on the website, isthisadreampodcast.com. I'd love to hear from you. There's also a button there to donate via PayPal if the spirit moves you. Or another way you can help out is by leaving a review on whatever app you're listening with, which will help other like-minded people to find it. Or just listen and enjoy. That's totally fine too. In this episode, I am talking with lucid dreaming author and coach Craig Webb. We cover a range of topics, including musical and creative inspiration in dreams, lucid living principles, reoccurring daymares, reality creation, dreaming practice preparation, grounding techniques, mutual dreaming, and lucid flying experiments, among other things. Footnote for context, this was recorded pre-pandemic. I edited the conversation in some spots for time. There's definitely something for everyone in this episode, so kick back and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Craig Webb. Craig is an author, dream researcher, dream coach, composer, and inventor. He has a degree in physics and went on to do pioneering lucid dreaming research at Stanford with Stephen LaBerge, including being involved with the creation of the NovaDreamer, one of the first lab-certified lucid dreaming induction devices. In 1986, Craig had a near-death experience where he almost drowned during a whitewater rafting trip, which remarkably resulted in an amazing outpouring of nightly dreaming experiences, including powerful lucid, visionary, and precognitive dreams. And all of a sudden, he had the dream recall of a wizard, recalling up to 10 full dreams a night with ease. He has designed personal development and biofeedback tools and helped found and produce the weekly radio show Making Contact that has been airing since 1995. He has consulted on major motion pictures and worked personally with world-class athletes, celebrities, authors, and CEOs, helping them achieve profound breakthroughs. His book, The Dreams Behind the Music, features stories from over 200 major artists of music inspired by dreams. Maybe a couple of these you've heard, but I would bet the vast majority of them you haven't. He also sprinkles some dreaming and lucid dreaming advice throughout the book. You can find Craig online, where he offers trainings and dream counseling services, along with a bunch of helpful free dreaming resources at craigwebb.ca. That's Webb with 2 B's. He probably doesn't remember, but I met Craig back in 2001 at the International Association for the Study of Dreams annual conference in Santa Cruz. I was part of the student team that spent the better part of the year organizing the event. I believe he did a presentation on lucid dreaming, which we talked briefly after, and he gave me his business card, which I actually still have. I found his presence and exuberance for lucid dreaming inspiring and held on to the card in case someday I wanted to look him up. Well, it took a couple minutes, but that day has finally come, and I am excited to have him here on the show. So, without further ado, people of the world, I'd like to welcome to the podcast Mr. Craig Webb.
Wow, thanks, Adam. Great intro, and I'm amazed after all these years you get to sort of serve people with your passion. So that's inspiring for me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a little bit of a slow burn, but
that's good. You grew it organically. It sounds like you don't want to rush it. Too much fertilizer and water at once might kill the healthy plants.
That's true. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on the podcast to chat about one of my favorite topics, lucid dreaming.
Yeah, one of my passions too, and part of what I call lucid living.
Ah, yes. As you may have heard, this podcast is called Is This a Dream? Yes, there's a reality check baked right into the title, people. So I would be remiss not to start with that very question. Is this a dream? And please explain your answer.
Well, like some good Socrates-style conversations, my best answer would be answering with a question, and that is, if so, who's the dreamer?
Yes.
And then maybe a little more explanatory for people who are like, that's weird. I would say it's a dream and it's not. Maybe it depends on our level of awareness, and dream in that case might be used as an analogy with waking life having similar principles in some ways to the sleeping dreams of the night. And then it gets pretty interesting which principles, maybe experiences are similar, and then which aren't. And then what can I use from one to help benefit more from the other?
Kind of a little bit of the layers of the onion analogy there.
Yeah. The dream of life, the dreams we hold in our life for our career, our love, etc. And then the dreams we have at night, they're probably linked. It's my feeling.
What currently interests you the most in the world of lucid dreaming?
I guess I'm most passionate now, I think, of delivering some of the fruits and the gifts, and I guess sharing some of the experiences that I've really been graced with. So writing and teaching and offering information to people who are interested, kind of like your podcast. So thanks. You're helping to meet my greater need of giving back. In terms of my personal path and practice, I focus quite a bit on lucid living and then lucid dreams as a support for that. Sort of consciousness experiences that aren't necessarily physical, sensory input, although sometimes the synchronicities that sort of link the two are fairly physical. But the subjective sort of helping in practical ways in waking life, and then here and there when I interpret life as a dream and use some of the lucid living principles, how that can help me or the deeper me maybe on inner levels, spiritual growth or expansion of who I think myself to be. So those things. And in terms of actual experiences in lucid dreams, there's a few that I have come as my, I guess, favorite collection of what to try once I become lucid in dreams.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. As an experience, one of the benefits of dreaming and living should be fun and learning, hopefully. creativity, learning, and fun are the really three big things we're going to get out of any experience. So often there's learning involved just because that's the nature of life and the psyche and dreams being part of that. So we don't have to focus on it quite as much. So fun could be, I would just try to expand any limit in dreams. Example, I'd like to fly as fast as absolutely possible. I remember a series of dreams, so that I'm not misleading our listeners here, that all of a sudden I was able to do this, because that's not really usually accurate. Certainly not for me, but for most people, because I train a lot of people. It's usually more a progression of learning or progression of experiencing, passing boundaries. So in this case, it was kind of speed of flying. And I like to fly. I think that's a pretty good favorite for a lot of people. It's that lightness, the freedom from gravity. So we're feeling lighter, freer in the dream and maybe in our life, and we become more fully lucid. And then I would choose to fly in different things. Sometimes aerobatics, so more, I guess, skillful flying, like what the freestyle ski jumpers do. And then sometimes just pure speed. Other times different positions, directions, like flying feet first, backwards, upside down. Maybe what some of these squirrel suit people try. But I'd say the progression that was most interesting, and from time to time I still focus on it, is going as fast as is possible to go. It's kind of hard to put it into sort of waking normal English words, because the words I even feel now telling it have their limits. You know, what does fast mean and speed? It's more of an experience. It started with dreams where I was flying across usually lakes. So in this case, I was kind of skimming along lakes, really high speed, and speeding up a little bit once I'm conscious in the dream. And then I remember one time I was going pretty fast, and then all of a sudden this block or group of trees, really was kind of a block, probably symbolically also, that sort of appeared suddenly right in front of me. And I had to kind of veer up, as sort of imagine some turning a corner at really high speed. I thought, I'm going to just ram and kill myself on the trees, and woke up a little bit in fright. And then with a little more waking logic, maybe 15 seconds after the heavy breathing slowed down, I said, oh, wait a minute, I could just fly through the trees. It's a dream. But I didn't have the full logic in the dream, so I kind of hit a fear barrier, right? Anyways, and then in one dream, so here I am looking in my glass here, and there's a head of lettuce. And so I said, wait a minute, that's crazy. What's this? I must be dreaming. Oh, yeah, great. And then I remembered I wanted to try my new dream experiment. How fast can I go at like the limit? What's the possible speed? And I remembered the dream where I kind of got stuck and worried about hitting the trees, and then a few others. And I said, no, I don't want any limits. I just want to go pure, super, ultimate speed. So I just kind of think, yeah, I want to fly at the fastest of fast possible. And then, I'm starting to accelerate pretty well as, I guess, a dream body in relation to the environment. In fact, I remember most of the items, or I guess objective out there stuff in the dream falling away and just kind of like whizzing, maybe a little bit of form, but not really anything I could make out, going by very quickly, maybe some sound. And then all of a sudden this thought arrives, wow, if you go any faster, that's it. You're going to die and not wake up. But I didn't really believe it. I have my scientist mind usually with me. And in this case, it was more of a body level test, almost felt like, do I buy this thought or not? And I'd had a number of other dreams, some after the fact, like the trees I told you about, and some kind of in the dream. I actually sort of passed the test or made it through the blocking thought, where I just kind of said, nope, that doesn't feel accurate. And I just didn't buy it, or didn't think it, or didn't believe it anyway. And in this case, I said, no, I don't buy it. Just bring it on. Bring it. Maybe the analogy like Scotty on the Starship Enterprise pressing the warp drive button of, we're ready to go full speed, Captain. And you know how you kind of see it disappear into light almost instantly compared to the speed it was going. Something like that happened to me. And wow. Can't really talk too much about what the experience in that time, because I'm not sure time really makes sense, but I can sort of try my best in English. Let's say for a while, whatever that exactly was, but if I kind of interpret subjectively in waking life, maybe a minute or something, I was in pure speed, or I was pure speed, or something like this. And then after that, slowing down or maybe sort of decelerating, I was able to kind of look backwards to see, hey, what just happened? Where was I? Who was I? What was I? And I saw an electron kind of moving around. I guess in waking life I would interpret at the speed of light. But electrons zipping around at mega high speeds inside a little RCA circuit. And I kind of knew that that's what I was a second ago. But it was kind of like, wow. And I woke up super exhilarated, kind of electricity all around the edges of my body. And going, whoa, that was pretty cool. If that's pure speed, I like it.
Wow. I'm curious, did you have lucid dreams before your near-death experience? And was there much of a learning curve for you as far as stability, navigation, and dream abilities go?
Yeah, well, I might take a moment, does that make sense, to just sort of say a little bit what my near drowning was, just so you get a little picture of.
Sure.
I think it's important to my life path and sort of where I'm delivering my experiences from in terms of maybe cultural or cosmology even. I had studied science, actual physics. And my question behind it was really how the world, or maybe life or the universe, how everything works. So I kind of had that from young years. My dad was a scientist. Still is, you know. And I just fell into that way of thinking, living. And then almost pretty suddenly, I would say, if you look at the specific experiences, some of them were extremely sudden. But if you look at all of them together, maybe over about a year, I had these powerful changes. And then one of them was getting stuck under a raft, whitewater rafting. I was actually in Quebec City. I studied at Université Laval in French. It's kind of a whole new experience. But while I was there, I went rafting on a pretty wild river. It's called the Jacques Cartier River. But it's good for rafting. People often go on there. I'd been canoeing and rafting, and I was a big swimmer all my youth, so I wasn't afraid of water or anything. In fact, I would actually sit near the back of the boat because, like a bus, it's usually more fun ride. You know, you get the bumps. So I'm on the back of the raft, and then we hit some rapids, and like a taco, the boat sort of flipped up. And without any chance to really gasp for air, that's kind of one of the important things. I got suddenly submerged and then stuck under the raft because I had my life jacket and helmet and what you're supposed to have on. But I couldn't see. It was fall, and the water was pretty silty. You know, you can imagine it's sort of dirt swirling around in the rapids. And I was just bumping like 3, 4, 5 times. At that moment, you know, the first few bumps, it was kind of fight and flight. Just, oh my God, I gotta get air. And then fairly suddenly, within about 2-3 seconds, this very strange peace entirely came over me. But along with a simple single thought, wow, I'm dying. This is it right now. Kind of take a breath here and remember that moment. It was just very strange to have peace come, because I didn't think dying would be like enjoyable or peaceful. But that was kind of after interpreting. At the time, I just felt peace, you know, and I was like, very odd. And then cut to next scene. I'm back on the actual raft, physically speaking. I'm rafting the rest of the day. And I believe, in retrospect, not from memory, but that the guide probably pulled me out and said, hey, get back in, you know. He lost a few people, not just me. And then I wasn't too freaked out. I just kept on paddling through the rapids so it would make it through. But I did notice right away, like within days even, I started having incredible dream recall. So this starts to answer your question, because before that, I'd maybe had one dream a month, if that. You know, I wasn't like a disbeliever. I just wasn't really interested or focused on dreams. And now all of a sudden, I started getting 5, 10 dreams, clear ones a day. And Adam, you know how they kind of disappear sometimes by morning or breakfast, unless you really make an effort? I think many of the listeners can relate. And that's how my experience was up until this. There must have been some kind of consciousness or mental opening, or I don't know what exactly, but it was so clear, and I remember them clearly past lunch, and sometimes following days, or even like a few days later, I'd remember all the ones from the day before, or 2 days, 3 days before. I was like, what? So I started noting the data. What does that mean? I started writing down my dreams and recalling them. And so fairly officially, I had a near drowning. I certainly had a strange experience of sort of facing the fear of death there underwater. And then in my more full interpretation of what I think of as a near-death experience, and Raymond Moody, who some of the listeners might know, Life After Life was his big movie, but he writes about near-death experiences and still speaks on that. Pretty good visionary forefather of the whole, I guess, consciousness and sort of conscious dying movement and what happens after you die and such. He said, yeah, I like the way you interpreted, Craig, because he heard me speak in London once. And he says, I think the way you tell it is actually more accurate, because I say my near-death experience was actually a degree in physics. And I don't want to knock my degree in science, and I got my degree and everything, so that's good. But I was cutting off from intuition, feeling. I wasn't trained anything about relationships, sort of communication skills, really, maybe other than, present an oral or present a paper. And then all of a sudden, another part of the larger me came knocking pretty hard and dragged me screaming and kicking to research what I now call subjective science, or first-person experience, for probably about 7 years. So I did finish my degree, but I started shifting more into first-person explorations, and had, my first lucid dream pretty shortly, within about a month after that. And I just learned about it, reading a book, and say, oh, that's cool, I'll try that. Actually, I'd had my own experience just sort of making up a technique that I later learned was an official technique. Now it's called the mild technique. Some of the listeners might know. Mnemonic induction of lucid dreaming. Which is kind of visualization mixed with intention and maybe rehearsal, depending how you frame it. But at the time, I just called it memory bombs because it worked great for remembering my lunch. I would say, okay, when I go to school tomorrow, when I put my hand on the door, I'll remember my lunch. Sort of setting a reminder in the future like we might do on our phone now, but we didn't have smartphones then. So I just tried that same technique. Hey, next time I'm in a dream and I experience dreaming, which I didn't know exactly what it was, but I'm going to remember that I'm in the dream and see what happens. And it worked the first time. I remember the first night I was like, wow, crazy. I'm sleeping in bed and here I am in this other world. And there was a few characters around and I didn't know what to do. I was kind of so surprised that the dream kind of evaporated into blackness. And I was kind of amazed that it was so easy and nobody had ever told me. And later I read about it and I guess refined it quite a bit. But it kind of came natural, and I think that I don't want to give the impression anybody has to be some big guru or spend 1,000 years learning. It's something every person can experience. A lot of kids experience it naturally. I came across it fairly naturally. I mean, I don't think you have to have a near death, but I just was starting to question, hey, what's going on in this other part of me that's starting to push in on my consciousness and my memory, these dreams. And then kids do it naturally. A lot of people actually go lucid in their life naturally without knowing about it. They don't even call it that because they have a lot of nightmares and they just want to find a way to put an end to them. And I think that's extremely valid. So however you get there is fine. And then once you're there, you can certainly learn refined techniques. If you're going to travel in Europe, I say it's good to have a guide who knows some of the languages. You could go without and do fine. But if you want to save time and see interesting stuff, find some people who've been there.
You worked as a researcher with Stephen LaBerge's team at Stanford and later at a hospital in Montreal. How was that time for you, and what did you take away from it?
After about the 7 years of personal, I call those my subjective science explorations, kind of having a whole bunch of lucid dreams and many other experiences, I decided I wanted to explore it a little bit more and also really not throw out the baby with the bathwater, include the mind, the science, the research, and even some of the technologies that our culture has been giving as a big gift, I think, back to the world. The various indigenous cultures, Tibetans, many of the native tribes and things have been using altered consciousness and dreams, and even specifically lucid dreams, for like millennia. So we might not be bringing a ton new up until maybe some of the science research to the mix, but when we bring technology and our framework of our culture, I think that's valuable. So I wanted to wed those two things and ended up, through a little bit of synchronicity, I guess, at the Stanford research, where I know the pioneering lucid dreaming research and also, I guess, public awareness was happening, because I thought it was exciting and I wanted to learn more and include the science half and not just get stuck in sort of the new age or out there movement. Kind of bridge both worlds, because both seem pretty valid. The inner experiences that, yes, I might be able to point you to the door, but you have to go there yourself. And then the outer, more objective stuff that we can put electrodes on, or we can have statistics and look at a lot of people and see very strong trends. But there's got to be a good equivalent and a good way to experience and validate both. And ideally, and I think I've had some success, and at Stanford we had some success, bridge the two languages, those two worlds. So that, science people and mental people, which I definitely was. I say I'm a recovering thinkaholic. A bit of a joke, but also true. Still recovering into my heart and to intuition and some of these parts of me that I'd cut off from. So that some of us recovering thinkaholics folks can experience inner worlds, and then be people who are very strong on the intuitive, like a mother, a simple mom who's like very connected with her children or nature or the family. And not to demote motherhood at all. I think it's actually a really high profession, and actually in India is regarded as the highest office, motherhood. But just someone who hasn't maybe trained as much in academic or science or some of the technology. So we should have ways for different people to bridge, and really it's the diversity movement of including the other, but in this case sort of the mind and the heart or the intuition. I've been trying to do that personally in my life and sharing some of what I found. And I think the Stanford was a huge contributor to integrating those two because they were both present there.
As a recovering thinkaholic, did lucid dreaming help you with this recovery? And in what ways do you think it has the potential to help others with cognitive and emotional struggles?
Well, definitely lucid dreaming has plenty of benefits and very few risks or sort of negative downsides. I know there's some people who promote it as the cure for everything and there's no downside. I don't know if I agree 100% because I've had a long 30 years seeing a lot happen. But I would say generally out of a lot of things out there, it's pretty positive. You can't do too much negative with it, except maybe, I'll just mention it, watch out a little bit for the idea frameworks when it's associated with thoughts like, hey, anything can go in life and you can do whatever you want because life is a dream. That can get a little bit risky. It just usually gets extreme. Yeah, their own little risk is that sometimes people get a little bit more into, or they, I guess, sort of cut themselves off from life. They're into their dreams more. And they don't deal as much with their relationships or the lessons life is bringing them or their health, and that's not great either. So as long as you keep a little balance with those two things, then it's all pluses. I would say one of the big pluses, I've used it that way, is to expand our identity, who we think of ourselves as. And, who we are and who we think of ourselves as might be quite different. I don't want to say what it is for everybody because I don't really know. I've seen trends and I work with lots of clients who I help shift in that way. But each person will have to kind of notice, and I'll just give more principles and my experience, and then they can infer a little bit what might be helpful for them. The empowered approach is what I like. But one of the things that came early on was, wow. I don't know if it was first lucid dream, but definitely in the first dozen, I started really getting this thought. Well, I don't know if thought is the right word, but like perspective. I mean, the word doesn't really work. New identity is about the closest, but that even sounds a little watered down. I started experiencing like, wow, capital W-O-W. I am way more than who just Craig is in waking life, whoever I is. But if I can say in a dream that Craig's in bed and whoever is saying it, that's getting pretty interesting. And then whoever is noticing it later and remembering it, that's kind of interesting. It starts to really expand my perception of who I was. And then maybe I expand past a little bit of who my limits were. I believe for me, my joke and sort of truth of recovering thinkaholic is that I was kind of stuck as a pretty mental person. And I can say that now with pretty good feeling that I'm not quite as stuck there. I do have a gift and a skill there, so I don't want to knock it. But I connect with feelings more, communicate. Hopefully I'm somewhat intuitive and can connect with that level of information. And so, yeah, it's helped me a little bit in that way. Not specifically in only lucid dreaming, but it was a help to shift my identity. I sort of used it for different lessons and identity expansion kind of experiments and dreams. But I interpreted some of the frameworks, and then as I started growing personally and realizing that, wow, I'm limiting myself unconsciously in a lot of ways. It's not really anybody's fault. Maybe a little bit the culture has some limits that are built in. But I started just expanding, exploring, and trying a lot of new, pretty different things. Some of them were travel. I went to South America, lived 6 months in Ecuador. I was practicing a lot of dreams and lucid dreaming then, but it was pretty mind-blowing in the fact that I'm stuck in super doer mode. Achieve something, become someone, accomplish, maybe earn money. And in South America, where I was, in a rural, small community, that wasn't at all the focus. They would wake up and go take the coffee off the plants, and the kids would be laughing in the bedroom and spend the whole day with them and maybe go to school a little bit. And then they'd pull the organic papaya, and the community would meet and gather. And I don't want to say it's utopia, but they had a lot of just being energy. And I was trying to organize courses, and I won't go into everything, but I really found that I was stuck in achieving. And it's okay. It's the doing side of life. You don't want to throw it out. But I was really missing a whole part of myself. So it wasn't just lucid dreaming, but it's certainly one of the catalysts that helped an awful lot in my personal growth. And it's one of the things that can help a lot of people. Your identity will shift, I'm pretty sure I can say it hands down here, heart down, that the moment you recognize, if you haven't already, that you can be fully conscious and kind of listening, at least to some degree, with the part of you listening to the podcast, me and Adam now, but with your physical body. But you can be in a dream and then realize you're dreaming and know that that physical body's in bed. That's going to be a pretty serious identity shift and like a super wow moment. And it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, really powerful. Lucid dreaming is certainly a pathway to, as far as all the different consciousness expanding things and ego challenging things that you hear about, and there's many pathways to the top of that mountain. Lucid dreaming is certainly one of the lower risk ones, that you don't have to take a substance and be affected for 12 hours or whatever it might be. It certainly can change your perspective pretty quickly. We're going to take a little break. We'll be right back.
Is this a dream? Is this a dream podcast? Is this a dreampodcast.com?
And we're back. Speaking of daytime sort of experiences, I heard you talk in another interview about a concept you called reoccurring daymares, which I thought was brilliant. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how it ties into the idea of lucid living?
Oh, thanks. That's a beautifully phrased question also, just to kind of honor it.
Thank you.
It kind of really does get at the core of what I think I'm going to kind of do a soliloquy for a few seconds here. Early on, I guess, I wanted to kind of find catchy words that could sort of make people stop a little bit. One of the phrases there was recurring daymares. And anybody who's starting to explore dreams has probably had recurring nightmares or something that's not so pleasant that ideally, if they had more choice about it, they would probably put an end to, or at least shift somehow. First off, when anything's repeating too much, it's just boring and you're probably not learning. If it's super positive and it's repeating, well, it's probably better. I'm not sure anything that's repeating exactly the same way is really growth. So probably if you're in an infinite loop like a Groundhog Day movie, you still want to find a new or more interesting expansion to the ending. But still, positive is better. In this case, if it's upsetting, or let's say some child's having recurring nightmares, we want to have a shift. What's equivalent and the kind of missing principle, I guess this is where it makes sense to take a little bit longer, is that life is really a printout. That's another one of my phrases. It's a pretty good analogy in sort of the computer world. That you take something that's in software, like your word processor file or an Excel spreadsheet, and you print it out from invisible hard drive or on the cell phone or whatever, and it comes into 3D on a piece of paper. You make it more visible in the physical senses when it wasn't before. So something inside goes to the printout of, in this case, a piece of paper, but I'm using it as an analogy for life, that what happens on subjective levels in our dreams, that's a perfect subjective level, but also other, meditation, pretty deep creative absorption states, and even just subtle thoughts that go on in the back of our mind during like pretty waking normal hours, our beliefs, you could say, but also just recurring thoughts or mental habits, sometimes emotional habits. That stuff prints out into our life. And I'll give some examples, but that's the important principle. So just note here, we have it's sometimes called the law of attraction. What you focus on is what you get. You create your own reality. There's lots of ways of saying this. The Secret, the movie, is kind of about that. And, I know not all the different versions of it are favorites of everybody, but the principle's pretty strong. The inner becomes outer. And my belief also, the outer becomes inner. Different people who said it in a lot of different ways. I think Jung said the intricate order and the extricate order, and Bohm, some of the physicists use some of that language too. And so there's a flow of inner to outer worlds, and let's say from below or maybe beyond the physical senses into the physical senses. So from the software level to the printout of our physical senses. And if we have recurring dreams, let's say a chase nightmare or something, I can pretty much guess that if it's not addressed in dreams or on the subjective level, Not 100%. I don't want to tell anybody what has to happen because that's not good. But from experiences and what I've seen a lot of, if they don't catch it early, subjectively in dreams, then it prints out into their life as usually a relationship dynamic that's pretty unpleasant, or God forbid, a real bad health challenge, or maybe a lost job, or some kind of problem that ends up in the waking printout that we call life. And I put a phrase around that, calling it recurring daymares. And the recurring part of it is what should sort of help get us lucid. So the lucid living comes in when we start to see a recurring pattern. It's one of the ways we can benefit from recognizing, oh, there must be a lesson here. Whatever deeper wisdom or whatever energy or source is creating the life scenario that I create, which I do believe it's at some level created, not just randomly occurring out there. It's whipping up the same scenario or a similar scenario, like let's say a job, an overbearing boss or something, or maybe money problems, or maybe a certain health problem in a specific part of my body, or a recurring relationship dynamic in my different partners, or sometimes even my car or my pets or something, because everything picks us up at some level energetically. So when we see something recurring, then it's a recurring daymare, and it's good to use lucidity principles and say, hey, what would be my best ending? First off, probably a new feeling, because the recurring stuff usually doesn't feel great. It's usually unpleasant. If it's a really positive recurring, well, keep it going and maybe just amplify a bit. But usually it's not so pleasant, and when it's like a broken limb or a relationship trouble or a lost job, we probably can think of a better ending that we'd be more happy with, that would meet more needs for us and maybe the partner in the relationship. And that's what the lucid living's for. Really just add a little bit of reflection, consciousness, slow it down, and then choose more lucidly, hey, what would I like to create? And just the choice itself is super powerful, because clarity is one of the big, principles and sort of seeds in what we grow in our life. In the law of attraction model, our clarity and what we focus on. But also the new feeling that we come with if we imagine the ending of, wow, a super fulfilled relationship that doesn't end with, fights, or the person sort of heading out without ever telling me that they were leaving, or whatever other unpleasant endings might happen, or vice versa, that I leave because I'm not at all fulfilled. That we get more lucid and say, wait a minute, I'm really clear what I want rather than just what I don't. And there's something recurring, and it's just, if maybe it's not even unpleasant, it's just getting kind of boring now. What would I really want and prefer? And that's what I encourage people. Just think lucid in waking life. What's my best ending? What's my best scenario? And a lot of times that simple phrase or thought or question can super deeply shift our life. It can certainly shift our dreams. And dreams being a little bit quicker moving energy, or sometimes responding quicker and sort of shifting or change format to life. It shows us how it works in life to just shift it first inside, call it the inside out approach. And then we start acting in different ways, speaking to people differently, maybe energetically, telepathically, if you believe that, delivering different messages, and then the world responds. Sometimes it responds just, the person answers us with a little more respect because we spoke a little more thoughtfully to them, or we listened to their point of view empathically, rather than just telling them how life is. And then sometimes it comes a little more magically than logically, and all of a sudden that dream job we've been really wishing somehow could happen, we get a sudden offer with a salary beyond what we thought was possible. All of a sudden, a friend just says, wow, there's this opening just down the street and they're looking for someone exactly like you. And by the way, they just posted it today. You want to go check it out? But that's kind of lucid living, and the recurring daymares can be a good cue, just like recurring nightmares can be a cue for something we want to shift in our inner world. Hopefully I wasn't too long, but it gets at a few subtle principles there.
Yeah, it's almost as if there's this element of dreams being this sort of training ground for life, wherein if you learn some of these principles in dreams about expectation, intention, and learning to resolve nightmare kind of situations, that those skills, although sometimes in life it might take a little more time, and also there's a transference from the dream to the life world, but you can learn to resolve these reoccurring life situations in the same ways. And sometimes just by working in your dreams that can happen, but also the dreams can be a sort of guidepost for how this can work in the
Training
waking life.
grounds. Yeah, proving grounds.
Yeah. So I want to get to your book, but first, you are a musician yourself, and I have an excerpt from a dream-inspired track of your own queued up here to play called Morpheon. Tell us a little bit about this track and its dreamy origin story.
Oh, yeah, great. I like that one. It's kind of a sort of rock and roll instrumental track. The inspiration for that specific one was, at the time, I had a service where they were looking for different songs for different movie soundtracks. So that was going to be for the Matrix 3 soundtrack, and I was submitting it. And actual content inspirations for that song, I noticed, just like we have in more visual side of dreams, or maybe the thematic side of dreams, there's recurring elements, recurring symbols, sometimes characters, sometimes feelings, sometimes plot, themes, things like that. But, you know, each person has their own lexicon to some degree, and then there's some universal ones. And for me, musically, because I was, and still do, have a lot of musical dreams, I was noticing there was often this descending sort of 3 number. So the 3 would manifest as triads, sometimes da-da-da, or triplet notes. You probably heard it in like a reggae where it goes boom, 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 dum, 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 boom, boom. So you can have this 3 instead of a 2 or a 4. And then especially it was happening very often in descending sequence of 3 notes. So da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I thought that was just kind of interesting that it was happening quite often, and I decided to include that. And then some of the sounds, sort of instruments that I heard in my dream, or inner levels, got incorporated into the soundtrack. And then I guess the title, Morpheon, came from Morpheus, a Greek god connected with sleep and dreams. This is actually the first time I've ever shared this, Adam, so the listeners, they might not find it too wow, but I think it's kind of cool. At the end of the word Morpheus, it's usually E-U-S, but I put E-O-N to name that song, and it's actually pretty close to the word Neo backwards, which was the name of the main character in the Matrix. So I was kind of slipping in a little bit of the movie symbolism to the name.
Very cool. Here is Morpheon. Yeah, I hear some of those 3s in there.
You heard them a little bit there?
Yeah, you got that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2.
I got the triplets and sort of pair 3 notes kind of descending in different sort of flavors, or I guess different instruments or layers.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't played it in a while. It's fun to hear it. Gives me a little more perspective now.
Yeah, it certainly has that matrixy vibe to it. So let's talk about your book, Dreams Behind the Music. Along with advice on creative dreaming, this book is a treasure chest of stories from over 200 artists. Stories of inspirations that came from dreams, many times resulting in quite successful music. You'll find expanded versions of a couple you've probably heard, like Paul McCartney's Dreamland inspirations for Yesterday and Let It Be. And then there's the rest of the book, which, as it spans from ancient to modern times and over all styles of music and parts of the world, you're pretty much guaranteed to find interesting stories about artists and composers you enjoy. Here is a small handful of my favorites that I had never heard before. Johnny Cash getting the idea for the mariachi horn section in Ring of Fire from a dream, the ever-cool fuzz guitar riff that drives I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, Keith Richards heard it in a dream, the iconic doo-wop section in the timeless Flamingos hit I Only Have Eyes for You, also from Dreamland, and my number one favorite that I never heard, the melodic theme tracks Interlude and Exitlude, which bookend the Killers album Sam's Town, my favorite Killers record, were from a dream that Brandon Flowers had. Here's a quote. "It sounds ridiculous," recalled Flowers, "but it was Kurt Cobain on a ship in the clouds. He was singing this melody, and I remember thinking he sounded like Bob Dylan, so that made it even weirder." Back to me here. So that kind of blew my mind. Craig, what inspired you to embark on such a massive project like this?
Massive is a good word. That's probably 3,000 or 4,000 hours of research, interviews, writing, and then not even counting marketing and sort of what I call parenting the baby after it birthed.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty massive. I just wanted to do a really good job also, just not kind of recreate some stuff that was out there. So I could bring something new. I guess the topic seemed to help me personally bridge two of my worlds, which was kind of my creative artist musical side, and then my more science research, dreaming world. And my experiential world was very connected between the both because I often had lucid dreams and creative dreams and often dream music. And then just fascination because I love music biographies and stories of cool things, especially songs that I know and celebrities or well-known artists that I know. Or even shamans. Maybe I don't know the person, but I like the culture and the different things because they can apply to me directly. I can learn like different dances that came in dreams or songs or specific ways to breathe or whatever. And it can help me. Probably if it helps me, it helps some other people, so I can probably give it away. So that was all in the mix. And then I did want to kind of write a book that had some pretty good research behind it. Because I'd done a lot of online writing. I think the Dreams Foundation site had had many millions of hits and lots of reprints and articles and publishings and podcasts and such around the world, and that felt good. But it felt like something with way more depth and focus on one topic could be interesting. So that was kind of the source for why a book now after some of the other things. And there is about, I think, 750-ish plus footnotes in there or endnotes that really track where a certain proof, at least the artists saying the day they woke up, or sometimes a little even more objective proof of what happened. So I tried to track it best I can because mostly it's subjective experience that later played out in physical life. And you can't really prove directly somebody's subjective experience, or not easily anyway. And so I took it for granted. But I tracked all the original sources, and in many cases I found some of the more public sources were not at all accurate. In fact, I'd say about half the quotes had incorrect sources. They weren't said by the person who their company only attributed to. I was like, what? So kind of corrected that best I could. And apologies to any of the speakers if I didn't research fully enough to get them right. But I did my best, and so people can check that out. And it offers a little more trust because in the book, in some places anyways, and certainly for more academic-oriented folks who like the research and the facts, some of the things that are said there are pretty far out, or they might be beyond belief for some. Like, yes, pretty well-known people actually avoided or died because they did or didn't follow dreams, actual dreams that they shared, provable stuff. So it's like, wow. I wanted to note all the data and just put it out there, and people can make their own choice. What I found interesting after doing some of the research, you start to get like new things developing from the crowd that you wouldn't really notice if there was a few people there. Trends, I guess you might call it, but something a little different too. I'd call it even principles. And so that started creating chapters, and then I focused on precognitive dreams, things that came true, or actual artists who learned skill performing techniques. I thought that was pretty cool. Like I think it's 25-time Grammy winner Vladimir Horowitz, who many people never heard of. He's like maybe the second biggest Grammy winner of all time. Actually dreamt a number of his fingerings how to play the piano in really sophisticated ways that he probably couldn't have played without the dreams. And then other ones, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, who maybe some of the listeners know, but not quite as well known these days. One of the inspirations for Jimi Hendrix, by the way, and many other artists. He developed different ways to play multiple saxophones at the same time. And actually, his name includes 2 dreams, I believe. And so there were some pretty avant-garde sort of skills and things that I thought were pretty fascinating too. The violin techniques developed by Giuseppe Tartini that are still pretty sophisticated techniques, 400 or 500 years later now. So that was kind of fascinating to me. But I would say if we go to the core of your question, it's probably a vision dream that started it all when I was first, deciding. Maybe I'd been dating the idea of exploring, researching dreams, sort of thinking a little bit if I wanted to invest more time and really do it publicly in a major way. I had a very powerful dream, wondering and asking, falling asleep, hey, how could I best serve people and find the most joy and have the best career for who I am. I had a super, for me, just life-changing and powerful dream. I call it a vision because it wasn't quite dream. It was really so emotionally strong that I woke up with tears on my pillow. Had any of those before, Adam?
Oh, yeah.
Beauty tears more than just pain, sadness.
Yeah, wow. Yes.
Yeah, so I use the word vision. It felt like a different experience, probably a new identity. Maybe I was crossing time to a future self who was calling back to me about some beautiful future that was possible. That's kind of what I believe. But however we interpret it, the data was that I had the first half of this dream. I see myself touring around the world, presenting in high schools, conferences, all kinds of places, corporations actually, all about empowered dreaming. I call it applied dreaming, or lucid dreaming, or lucid living, or different related topics, consciousness, biofeedback technologies that help with the mind-body relationship that then helps lucid dreaming. So a little bit more towards the science, or sometimes towards more of the experience or the artist side. That part of the thing was just filled with joy, wow, this really felt good to speak to these high school students and see them try this and heal their relationship, or maybe solve a problem at home, or get rid of a recurring nightmare or something. And then the second part, I'm swirling around, kind of a spiral dance upward. I think the symbolism there is very important and maybe just powerful because I've seen it in a lot of other people's visions. With a partner, I'm kind of sort of dancing in a spiral upward, and this beautiful female partner. There's a guitar nearby, I think an acoustic guitar, and just beautiful music playing. And then the main thing was just this feeling of complete bliss. I don't know if bliss is even the right word. I could say love, but that's used in a lot of different ways. Joy / bliss, pure ecstasy, but not body ecstasy, just wow, why would I ever do anything else than feel this kind of. And then woke up because of the beauty of that feeling. Maybe a shift in my identity, I don't know, but I woke up with tears, just crying of how beautiful it was. Because I said, if that's a future, or if that's something I could do, share that kind of music, or live that kind of love partnership, or speak to those people, that would be incredible. It was strong enough that kind of like a link to a website. None of it had happened yet, really. But I clicked on the link, and here I am, 30 odd years later saying, yeah, it's been pretty good. But the second part of that vision dream was one of the things that motivated the book. So bring it back to your question there.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the Rahsaan Roland Kirk story is pretty amazing. He was blind too, and playing multiple instruments, real remarkable human.
Yeah, very gifted.
And another thing you mentioned, the sort of meta information thing. I don't know if you've heard of this show on Netflix called The OA.
Yeah, sure.
Because they sort of have this element of one of the story pieces is gathering meta information from dreamers to try and figure out information. And they have all these people whose dreams they're recording and looking for common themes. Near the beginning of your book, you quote Einstein, who says, "Intuition is the father of new knowledge. Intuition, not intellect, is the open sesame of yourself." And then you go on to write about the stories you've collected. Quote, "Seen together, this unique collection of individual experiences shapes an impressive and perhaps even surprising picture that shows how dreams have played a significant role in weaving the musical, if not overall, fabric of our culture. and this is me talking now, as we know, dreams and intuition aren't just limited to the creative arts. Every innovation that has happened in our modern world, from building skyscrapers to new cancer treatments, to the birth of the iPhone, to Pokemon, was born of creativity, intuition, and sometimes even dreams. Yet, we live in a society that often paradoxically seems to overlook, downplay, question, and undervalue these things. What do you make of this paradox, and do you see any large-scale cultural shifts of awareness and attitude towards these things on the horizon?
Yeah, nice one. Good, a lot of information in your question. I would say the paradox is a fun little wordplay. A homonym for a pair of docs, two doctors. We are healing this, and one of the examples of the pair is something like India, or a strongly religious and maybe spiritual culture, has for many, many millennia really explored the inner subjective. Yogis in caves, a lot of the Hindu rituals and other different types of religions, exploring the inner subjective. And they didn't really, up until more recently, develop as strongly on the physical side, maybe sort of more since the British arrived and since technology arrived and stuff. And then on the West here, let's say more North America, but around the industrialized nations generally, we focused a lot on the outer material success, living our dream, and technology, the newest, this and that. And that's been our little bit more focus. I have my ideas for where that big dynamic started. I think I might have mentioned them briefly there in the book. But what really happened is that we're focused in a little bit different directions. And then as we see now, I guess with the help of internet and maybe with the inner net of dreams and other subjective connections between people, we're starting to bridge the gaps culturally too, nationwide. So I see North America, and my experience personally, because I speak to a lot of people about the topic, but I think generally I see some of the trends culturally and in the media and stuff, is that we're going more towards creativity. Look at all these musical shows and the singing shows. And we're starting to connect more with the feeling behind the song. And you really gave a great dance performance because I felt you. So in the body, in the feelings, in the music, in the heart, and the intuition. There's a big cultural movement towards going what I call more inner explorations. Maybe lucid dreaming is one of those, but I don't think it's the only one. And then in the maybe more subjective or spiritual or religion-oriented countries, maybe indigenous cultures, they're expanding to include more technology. So I do see a balancing in a pair of doctors healing the world and the rift around the world. So paradox maybe, but also a healthy shift happening. I mean, my mathematics of how life usually works, both individually for our personal life and also culturally or maybe worldwide even. Usually it's good to explore the extremes of any duality. In this case, maybe the heart and the feelings and the mind. So in life and personally, it's usually good to explore the extremes, see what's there, kind of develop that, and then find what I call a conscious balance. You can't just arrive at balance without really expanding creatively into something new on each side. Otherwise, it's not really much of a balance, and you certainly don't grow much during the process. So we explore the extremes. In this case, maybe we explored spirituality and then technology, materialism as cultures. And worldwide, hopefully in time, we're bridging those back to have more of an integrated whole. And I say hopefully in time because there's lots of pretty nasty environmental, humanitarian, and emotional, male, female maybe, different dynamics where there's pretty strong separation skill, but still it could use some balancing, probably sooner than later, especially environmentally. If we don't know ourselves as the plants, the animals, what I call our one-legged nation of the trees and their four-legged nation of the animals, and maybe the zero-legged bacteria, snakes, and all the other fish, etc., then we don't know ourselves as that, then we can usually damage it as other and, fish the oceans dry or trample the forests or do things to that part of our larger self, the being of the earth anyway, that won't really serve us long term. Certainly won't serve our children and future generations, but even short term, it might not serve our environmental health. And, different maladies and different diseases are coming more and more, it seems, now because of the environmental and toxins and imbalance with all the radioactivity and maybe the radio waves even, in their houses and stuff. So I don't think any of those inventions and developments are bad. Just so we want to integrate them with the inner awareness of when, where, how, integrate it with the environment, with the other people, listen, empathy, and And when we get that together, then we got something pretty good.
It's all interconnected. Check out the Dreams Behind the Music, people. It's available around the world through the ubiquitous Amazon.com.
Dreamsbehindthemusic.com also. You can go direct to the site.
Ladies and germs, boys and girls, aliens and alienettes, it's time for a segment. It's segment time. Back in episode 1, I did a little segment called Fake Q&A. The concept was simple and self-explanatory. A Q&A based on questions asked by made-up people. Out of all the segments I've done so far in this show, this one seems to consistently get the most comments, both good and bad. Well, if we're being honest, they're mostly bad. One listener on Reddit commented while listening before bed, the loud electric guitar seemed very out of place. A good friend of mine said it made the show all of a sudden seem unprofessional. And then on the plus side, another friend said it was certainly unexpected and almost funny. So I thought, well, with enthusiasm like that, I gotta bring this thing back. I mean, sequels are usually pretty successful, right? So here it is, the segment nobody asked for, Return of the Fake Q&A.
Fake Q&A!
All right, so just like old times, got some questions in a hat here. Gonna shuffle them around and pick a few out. Here we go. Okay, so first question here says, what is your sign and are you sure? Sally from Weed, California. Okay, well, that's a zinger. Nothing to do with lucid dreaming, but all right. Hey, Sally, what's up? I'm a big fan of Weed, the town. Mount Shasta is one of my favorite crystal vortex alien hotspots in that part of the world. I am a Sagittarius, and yes, I'm sure, I think. Actually, to be fair, I don't remember being born, so now that you mention it, I guess it's possible someone could have written the date down wrong. So I'll just have to go with pretty sure on this one. Anyways, thanks for the question. All right, let's see if we can find something a little more on topic here. Okay. Of the lucid dreaming induction techniques out there, I'm really curious about wilds. Is this something that can be learned? And do you have any advice here? Michaela in Quito, Ecuador. Hey, Michaela. What a gorgeous part of the world you live in. Love it down there. Those mountains. Just all shades of wow. Great question. Okay, so for those who don't know, WILD, one of the best acronyms ever, stands for Wake-Induced Lucid Dreams, meaning you transition from the waking state to the lucid dreaming state with full awareness, no lapses, no falling asleep first. This is basically the Lamborghini of lucid dreaming techniques. It's at the advanced end of the spectrum. Obviously, it kind of simplifies things if you can learn to do it, and is an incredible experience and skill to acquire. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot to say here, and as I have to get to these other fake questions, I'll do the short in a nutshell version. Yes, you can learn how to do it, and the transition between states can be one of the downright strangest experiences you'll ever have.
Wow.
Some people describe being sucked into what feel like interdimensional portals at super high speed. Thunder is shaking, weird noises, strange unseen voices, encounters with presences. All these things are possible, and yeah, I've experienced all of the above firsthand. Also, sometimes the transitions are more gentle. There are varying techniques. Yes, a small percentage of folks are naturals at this. For the rest of us, it takes a bit of trial and error. That being said, the nuts and bolts approach usually involves a wake back to bed, where you do something to stimulate your mind in the beginning for a few minutes, and then let your body fall back asleep while retaining mental focus on your goal of entering the dream state consciously. If all goes according to plan, your body will enter sleep paralysis while your mind remains conscious. You will enter the liminal hypnagogic imagery state, which is a little different for everyone, but the cookie cutter version is it starts with geometric patterns turning into basic images. Maybe a little story emerges, and before you know it, there's an actual scene, and then you enter it. Like I said, it's a deep subject, and there are lots of quirks and details, but there are great sections in both the books I referenced in episode 1 on this. Shout out to episode 1! Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming by Stephen LaBerge and Howard Rheingold, and Lucid Dreaming Plain and Simple by Robert Wagner. I'll link to those again in the show notes. All right, good one. Okay, next. Shuffle this up a little bit. What's the deal with these false awakenings? Jerry, no last name. Okay, so false awakenings is a term for an experience that most lucid dreamers are well acquainted with, and you newbies will find out about soon enough. It basically means what it sounds like. You think you're waking up. Maybe you're in your bed or somewhere else, but in fact, you are actually just dreaming about waking up. Reality checks can come in handy here. Often these dreams seem very ordinary, enough to trick your brain into thinking it's in waking reality. False awakenings are extremely common for some reason when you are attempting to lucid dream. They can be strange, disorienting, and sometimes create extra layers within dreams. For example, while doing my dreaming practice, I will often have repeated false awakenings where I am basically doing the same thing, attempting to lucid dream, but from a different environment. Maybe I'm in a random dormitory or camping outside with people around. Sometimes this attempt within the attempt will become successful, creating a lucid dream within a false awakening dream. It's kind of like an extra pop quiz hidden in the process. The better you get at catching these, the more lucid dreams you will have. All right, good questions. This one says, if you were a TV show, would you be Breaking Bad or Friends? Looks like it's anonymous. I'd be Twin Peaks. Next question. Oh, hang on. Got a spider crawling across the keyboard here. Come here, little fella. I gotta get you into this cup here so you can go and be free. You know, like outside of my studio. Whoop, okay. Jumpy little guy. Oh, all right. There we go. Okay, the great outdoors. Try not to get eaten by anything bigger than you. And for local cuisine, may I recommend the mosquito. Go get 'em, tiger, spider. Tiger the spider. Don't die. All right, sorry about that. Back in here. See what shuffles out next. What is your favorite toe? Katie in Sugarland, Texas. Well, as you can see, the diehard fans are very engaged here. Hey, Katie. That is a strange question to ask someone. In my case, though, it so happens I was born with 11 toes, so that's easy for me. Number 11 is my fave. Kind of weird looking little sucker, but I think it's kind of cute. We are all really learning a lot here. Okay, let's see. Charlotte in Columbia Falls, Montana wants to know, what do you think is the best film in the 50 Shades trilogy? Hey, Charlotte. Love the Flathead Valley. Beautiful area. I've spent some quality time in your neck of the woods. I haven't seen any of those movies, so I can't really weigh in on that. But from what I've heard, probably number one? I'll have to ask my buddy Zach. I think he's pretty into those things. Thanks for the question, though, and watch out for those bears. Okay, wow, interesting questions. Let's see if we can find one about lucid dreaming. All right, this looks promising. What are your top 3 lucid dream commands? Felix in Montreal, Quebec. Ooh, that's a good question. Hey, Felix. So, for stabilizing and enhancing the dream, I like more lucidity now and more clarity now as commands. For deeper dives and finding interesting dream figures to talk to, I love the thought forms disappear command. It is a strange chicken, though. Don't say I didn't warn you. There's some fun discussion about that one and a couple others in episode 3 with Nikki Alice. All right, well, thanks everyone for the questions. Much appreciated. Granted, I made all of you up, but let's not let the details get in the way. In any case, this concludes the Fake Q and A.
Fake Q&A!
And we're back. All right, Craig, are you ready to move on to the rapid fire questions round?
I hope so.
Question number 1. What is a favorite dream-inspired work that did not make it into your book? This could be a movie, book, painting, building, or anything else remarkable from dreamland that is now manifest in our waking physical reality.
There's so many. I guess one of my favorites is, it's sort of in the book, I didn't really detail it too much, is Richard Bach's book, Jonathan Siegel. I had the good fortune to communicate with Mr. Bach, Richard, and learn a lot of the story. And I mentioned it briefly in the book, but that was directly inspired by, I think, at least one full vision dream. And then about 7 years later, which is interesting, anybody who knows or maybe liked the book or saw the movie also, the second half of the book was written after a few dreams where the seagull came back and told the second half of the story that Richard couldn't finish. So that's an interesting one in terms of sort of how it might have affected the culture. It really touched a lot of people. And then also as the creation story of there was a pause of 7 years between the vision dream and then the series of dreams that finished it, which for an artist or a writer, that must be so hard.
Yeah, that's a good period of time. In a nutshell, what are your thoughts about the movie Inception?
Oh, Inception. Yeah, wow. That was a big time. I was had the good fortune of speaking, I think, on media from dawn to sunset for like about 3 weeks when that came out because it was just such a huge topic. People like, what? This is possible? You can actually, enter into dreams consciously. Or in this case, in the movie, you can enter into other people's dreams, maybe. Which, actually I've seen subjectively and in my classes and maybe larger ways. To some degree, not exactly like in the movie, but it is definitely possible to influence other people and at least to connect and communicate on different levels, maybe like an inner Skype or something. And that you can check the facts in waking life after and verify some pretty rare things that you couldn't have known about any other way. So something like it is possible. So I like the general premise. I don't know if it's true. I've sort of seen online that people said it was. There are a lot of very strong connections because I track the data. But there's a Scrooge McDuck, Donald Duck's uncle. Mm-hmm. Scrooge McDuck, the comic book. There's a comic book series that has the exact concept of a dream machine where, I guess, I forget their names, but the sort of evil dogs that are going after the ducks create, and that they have this powerful world. And then the entire sort of storyline, theme-wise, of Inception plays out in the comic book before the physical movie came out. So I don't know if that was an influence, but I found it pretty striking that pretty much most of the plot and theme elements showed up in the comic book. So it doesn't at all remove, I think, from director Christopher Nolan's incredible skill at creating movies and writing and certainly directing. But it's an interesting connection there that people might not know about. I like the idea that they included sort of physical technology. In this case, I think it was a little bit more of an intravenous, some kind of maybe drug or something that the dreamers used to help them enter into conscious dreams. Just because it is possible to some degree to induce lucid dreams and other consciousness experiences with physical means. And that's one of the topics I'm more passionate about because, as I think you mentioned early on, I actually designed the NovaDreamer, the first mass market lucid dream mask that helped people have lucid dreams as a technology device. And it's got some pluses and minuses, and it's important. It wasn't really covered in the movie, but on some of the interviews I spoke about that, and I think it's important for people to remember, stay empowered. Anything you can do with an outer technology, such as medicine, a drug, certainly technology of a gizmo and this kind of thing. There are equivalent teachers, techniques, and other empowering ways you can do it personally without the outer fix. And then on the other side, like science in our culture and a lot of the statistics and the research that's helped us and the inventions and technologies that we rely on every day, like probably the podcast you're listening to right now, the technology behind it, it has its place. It's super valuable. So it's important just to note it and then see what the benefits and maybe some of the risks are. As long as we don't put our entire power on it, that's a big gift. And then the story itself was pretty cool. And they did sort of insert by the end an idea into someone's dream or their mind that they based an actual physical choice and decision on. I've had success in a very positive way and with permission doing that with my students also.
Interesting. What does your ideal nighttime routine leading up to sleep for an important lucid dream induction night look like? Okay.
Yeah, ideal practice. It changes quite a bit. I would say one of the ideals of my practice, and I encourage it because I do often teach and coach and guide groups, teleclasses, is that we mix it up quite a bit, and I do that personally. Just because one thing always the same, for me anyway, because I like new change, learning, can get a bit stagnant. So I mix it up, but some of the mainstays that I use often are clear, light mind, that's what I call it, getting into a really rich sense of well-being. whatever that word means for people. But something where you can start to notice thoughts, which is a little bit more the mindfulness approach. But it's a little different than that. It's not just a mental space. It's like a sense of connected with, I believe, our core. Core is the word in French or Latin maybe for our heart, notre cœur. And our core as our being is something like bliss, joy, well-being, maybe some other aspects, but that's pretty close to the heart of it. And if we enter into that, from that place spontaneously, without all kinds of fancy mental rehearsal or this and that, that can just bring spontaneous lucid dreams. In other words, you don't have to figure out in the dream that you're dreaming. You just spontaneously recognize, hey, I can fly, I'm dreaming, or I could try my experiment. So spontaneously triggered lucid dreams just from resonating with a certain momentum of being well, happy, at peace. It's usually a good idea for that technique, and I often write down my to-do items or make sure my schedule's done for the next day so that I'm not like stressed or worrying about that. So you have to kind of have some concerns that are valid concerns, but you clear those out by doing whatever means you can. So that's one of the things. It's always really important for me to have a gratitude practice. That may or may not affect the dreams, but it certainly affects my state. And I believe my state, like the inside-out approach we talked about before, affects how I act the next day and maybe what I attract in life. So I spend about 5 minutes being grateful for all the things that, on one side, life brought me. A new opportunity, a chance to share with Adam on the podcast. I'll probably be grateful a little bit later. And now, as I'm joking about it, it actually happens in real time. I just feel more gratitude for the gifts life brings. Even when they're hard lessons, I'm often fairly lucid in the middle of a very hard moment, just being at least grateful for the learning or the feedback. It's not BS, it's very true. I've managed to get there to some degree. And I think it's because of the gratitude practice. And then on the second part of that practice, grateful for choices that me, kind of as a Craig, actual physical person in a body trying to do my best in life, has made. And if I didn't focus on that, now I'm a bit better. But many people have a challenge with an inner critic voice that they'll just sort of beat themselves up, or I wish I could have, should have, would have. And I say, well, that's okay. It's good to learn and grow, and I don't mind that part of me that can teach and guide me. But only after I've kind of appreciated why I chose that, where I was coming from, maybe the limits I had that, I'm not necessarily learning calculus in first grade here, and that's allowed. So gratitude for choices I've made, self-appreciation, you might call it, self-love, and some kind of simple state that they sort of meet in that well-being space. Gratitude for other life, and I don't know if there's two separate in the end. The other stuff that happens to me out there and the choices that I think I make, they probably coincide quite a bit in your model that, life is a bit of a mirror or a dream that's created from some deeper part of me. If that works for you, then they're both kind of the same thing. But I make them a little bit separate, 5 minutes of each, and that gets me into a nice state. And then sometimes I do pretty different practices that aren't quite as universal. So those are two anyways. You ever tried either of those, Adam?
Yeah, actually, I do a gratitude practice before I go to bed every night. And I also aim for the light, clear mind. I've heard you explain that before, and I definitely appreciate that idea and what you were saying about trying to make sure your next day is scheduled out, whatever, so you're just not stressed about stuff, and that your nightly mindset right before you go to bed is so important if it's a night that you want to do your practice on.
There's an interesting kind of analogy around that helped me a bit. So maybe this will inspire listeners if they kind of understand it in sort of very experiential terms. Just think about our day. This helped me when I first heard it. I think Rinpoche spoke to me about that. But he said, we prepare for our day. You get your makeup on, or you dress your clothes nicely, do your hair, probably have a shower, and then whatever else. Maybe you get your cell phone ringer turned off for the office, or you have a coffee, whatever your ritual is. But you usually kind of prepare publicly to go out and meet the world, which makes sense. It's appropriate. It's good. But not so often do they prepare really well when I think they're going to be meeting possibly a more important person, their own inner self, their deeper wisdom, at least their subconscious, and maybe a connection with other beings. If you've had experience with having dreams for others, or even something like closer to telepathy or mutual dreaming or inception kind of things, you're going on inner levels to meet at least other beings, but maybe your own deeper self, that's a pretty important time to do some preparations and really look nice in emotional, mental, spiritual sense. So that idea helped me a little bit. It's at least as important at night to prepare for the inner meeting than the outer meetings in the morning.
That's a really beautiful way to word that. What advice would you give to someone who is new to lucid dreaming and has either not yet had their first lucid dream or is struggling with basic stability and consistency issues?
Well, and those two things, I would probably respond a little differently for each. The second one, who's maybe doesn't have a full grounded life, that they haven't gotten their emotions in check. And it might just be for really valid reasons. They had a car accident, they had a divorce, or a life-threatening illness, or a very tough upbringing. There's lots of super believable reasons that we should definitely have empathy for. So we're not at all labeling anybody. But let's say that they've come to a situation where they're a little challenged, either mentally, emotionally, perhaps spiritually, maybe physically even. Not quite as grounded as they like to be, balanced in their life and their friendships and emotions. I usually encourage people to get grounded first. By grounded, I mean specific things. And a little later on, at the start when I was sharing lucidity techniques that have now expanded around the world, probably most of the ones the listeners have heard were, at least some of them anyways, were the ones I first shared at Stanford that were sent out with each device and sent out on the internet, and I put them on the Dreams Foundation. They got 1 million downloads or something. So some of the first ideas for lucid dreaming techniques were there en masse as kind of quick Betty Crocker style techniques, and they are effective. That's good. I'm glad they're out there. But a little later after, and just to make sure people know about it, I added in that one of the most important techniques, perhaps the most important one, was to really be able to stay grounded when necessary. And I say that's most important because if you take 2 steps forward and 5 steps back because you have like a mental emotional blowout or a breakdown or a health problem, that's not so good, and we didn't want that to happen. By the way, if you're at a retreat center or with some really good guides or something, and you follow a shaman or a teacher, and you have somebody guiding and sort of coaching you and watching out for risky moments, by all means, you can go a little bit more in the direction of non-grounded. That's fine. And I saw a couple occurrences of that I wanted to add. Get grounded, and specific things that can do that with eat well, making sure to sleep well. That's probably the biggest one. And enough sleep is usually about 5 REM, or sleep cycles, which is about 7.5 hours for average person. You could have 9, but much more than 9 might start to work against itself a bit, and much less than about 6 or 4 cycles would start to work against itself a bit too. So somewhere between 6 to 9, let's say. So as long as you're getting enough sleep, eating well, and then I usually say also socially connected, not just isolated. For little periods, let's say you're on a Vipassana retreat or you're going for a meditation in the woods or something. Of course, you want to be alone, a creative retreat maybe. But just if things are getting, like life is getting very funny or everything's becoming dreamlike or all these synchronicities are happening all over the place or you're not sure what waking and dreaming or some pretty extreme stuff, just do the grounding techniques right away to make sure that you don't go too far and take 3 steps backwards for 1 step forward. And then you can continue. I think mystic Jane Roberts, also a great author, some of the listeners might know her. She said a specific line, I think it was Jane too, not Seth, who she kind of brought forth. But she said, the finest flights of fancy are firmly footed in the reality and the framework of daily living. And that's a pretty interesting polarity, but she said it knowing it from having really channeled and explored and dreamt and lucid and everything. And also published a book, got from not so abundant physically to an awesome house and a pretty successful career. So she lived it and knew it, and then she came with that phrase. Just make sure your explorations into other realms and consciousness and everything is grounded in a simple physical life. And you can choose to go one way or the other, a little more at any given time, but as long as you have that choice.
What do you currently see on the horizon for lucid dream studies and science? And what do you think perhaps or hope the field will look like 100 years from now?
100 years from now is a long way. Well, I could just do my guess. I guess more of a hope, maybe. I hope that some of the integrations we spoke about earlier happen. By integrations, I mean, let's say some of the imbalances within us, Maybe not everybody as badly, but each of us has a little bit of that. Like, let's say, the mental and the emotional. I have that challenge. Or the very grounded physical and the spiritual or intuitive. I have a little bit of that challenge. Or other cultural imbalances of power over or power with people. Or, there's lots of imbalances out there. That we bridge some of those more for the, let's say, a more fun life school here on Earth where we're all learning together and more respect. And yeah, there's going to be lessons and challenges and there's going to be some news headlines, but let's say half the news headlines are pretty positive celebrations of amazing new creative developments or cultural agreements than just sort of the karmic report of really dark things that are going on internationally, locally, and inside people. So if we can do that personally, I believe it'll happen more in the world, and lucid dreaming could be a great tool in that. And then my model of one of the big benefits and one of the big aims and what I hope for, that'll be one of the definitions of lucid living. Not fully conscious of everything. I know some people say become as conscious as possible. I don't really promote that view. Maybe I did a little bit before, but my view now is more just become conscious of what you need to if there's something that requires you to grow or shift or heal a recurring, let's say, nightmare or upsetting dream or a recurring daymare, a relationship problem. And if you do that in your personal life, then that'll help your community, your group, maybe your Facebook groups, whatever. And then larger ways, that'll help the nation and then internationally and then the planet. So we don't always have to be Gandhi and save, let's say, a nation. We can just do our personal work and then the world will respond as sort of the printout changes with our new software inside. So some of the models of principles, like the one I just mentioned, of lucid living and lucid dreaming, can apply so well to waking life that it'll bring much more, I think, joy, peace, synergy, community. I mean, here's one vision. This is borrowed directly from Richard Bach, who's an author that inspires me. I mentioned before, he's in the book briefly. He had a book 1 where he did a consciousness journey, and he saw a future where there was no actual war between nations. They just used, I guess, all the money and infrastructure spent on almost like an Olympics of technology and different creative developments, but nobody would be hurt. Except maybe occasionally when an accident would happen. But there was no intention of hurting or limiting or destroying or controlling other. It was just like this beautiful future where people pushed each other creatively. I like that a lot. So hopefully that'll come. It's one of the reasons behind the book, The Dreams Behind the Music. Let's get people and myself more connected with our creative source and just celebrate and come with new ways to do beautiful things and not just stuck on some of the problems and the recurring loops and, let's say, even worse things where we're just dissing and projecting on others. It's not so fun anymore.
Craig, thank you so much for this wonderful and enlightening conversation. I hope someday we can continue it. Where can people find you, interact, check out your classes, etc. online?
Well, people can drop by a dream. A little bit of a friendly joke there. But I've had people actually visit in dreams. They check with me, and then I had a similar themed or exactly the same dream theme that night. So that happens too, but it's also a friendly joke. Yeah, come on. If some of what I share seems interesting or resonates for you, people can check out applieddreaming.com. It's got 2 D's in the middle, Applied Dreaming. And that's kind of the teleclasses I offer, and they really go well because it's led over about 8 to 10 weeks, and we could grow a team, and we have a lot of fun, but it's all experiment based. I don't really tell people what life is or what lucid dreaming or what lucid living. I give a bit of hints and I talk about some of the frameworks and principles, but every week we try experiments together and everybody reports and inspires each other, and I learn a lot too, even still every time after 20 years I'm learning. So that's always pretty cool. And then the book, The Dreams Behind the Music, pretty easy website, dreamsbehindthemusic.com if you want to check that out. If you like some of what I shared personally, I often enjoy presenting at universities, businesses, or other groups, conferences. I always love that. It's my passion, and hopefully I can serve the community. If you know some community that could benefit, that would be more my speaker site, craigwebb with 2 B's.ca. Thanks, Adam. It's really been a nice chance to share some of my passion here and hopefully serve some of the folks and then get out there a little bit more some of these fruits that, if they're ripening, I don't want to see them go rotten on the ground. So I hope people enjoy a bite and see if they want to plant it in their garden.
Any final thoughts, parting words, or a message for all the dreamers out there listening?
Yeah, sure. One that I've shared many times, hopefully still valid. I wish really happy nightmares and daymares to everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig.
You're very welcome. And blessings to everybody on their journey here. It should be an adventure.
Coming up.
Being able to talk about darkness, being willing to be transformed in our own dreams.
With lucid dreaming author and researcher, Ryan Hurd.
To look in the darkened door, to go down the steps to see what our greatest fear is. I mean, this is how we become courageous. This is how we come to know ourselves.
Next time. Thank you for listening to Is This a Dream? A lucid dreaming podcast. Each episode is written, produced, sound designed, edited, and mixed by me, Adam Cotton. All the music you hear is also written and performed by me, except for the Seinfeld theme by Jonathan Wolfe. Each episode has a companion blog post with notes and links up at isthisadreampodcast.com. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review on whatever app you're using. Your ratings and reviews work wonders to help the people who are surfing around find it. Also, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, dreamers, I wish you all the best in your nightly journeys. Question reality, and don't forget to enjoy the ride.